Hey everyone, thanks for joining me again. This is the fifth video in the data visualization with D3 and React series. In the last video, we finished up building a basic bar chart. We actually didn't really finish what I'd like to do next time around, and if you recall, the chart looked like this. What I'd like to do is add some tooltips to this so that basically when you hover, the cursor goes over the one of the bars, it would give you some relevant data corresponding to that bar. Right, so that would be basically handling a mouse event, which would be a hover event. Today we're going to look at handling a few different mouse events, some very basic ones. And if you've been programming in JavaScript for a while, then you're probably quite used to handling the on-click event. Today we'll look at on mouse down, which has to do with when you press your a mouse button down over a certain element, and our element is going to be an SVG canvas. All right, and then we're going to look at on mouse move so that we can update the position of a circle that we're going to draw on our canvas. And then eventually on mouse up so that we can stop triggering that event, or that we could stop moving that mouse around or that circle on the canvas around when we move our mouse. So that's a lot of talking. Let's just actually start looking at the code. So in your app.js file, you'll see that you have two routes for two pages. All right, we're going to need a new page to work on this time around. So go into your pages folder, create a new file, and just call it drag.jsx, or whatever you like. I'm going to use three hooks, use state, use effect, and use ref, just like last time. Alright, we'll also need a style sheet for this one. Let's go into your pages styles folder and add a new style sheet. Call it drag.css. Import that. Alright, we'll need a header for this page, so we'll bring that in. That way we can add our links back to the home page, or our one link. Alright, and then we'll need a div that wraps the main content of our page. So we'll just call it drag main content. And then we'll need a canvas to wrap our SVG element. So we'll just give it a div with a class name of canvas. Alright, then we'll add an SVG. Remember, our SVG has a few important properties that we used. One was viewbox. We'll just go say 900 by 700 pixels this time around. Give ourselves some room to move. Be careful what you capitalize in that one. Excuse me. Make it responsive. So we'll say width is 100%. And same with the height. And we'll give it a background color of beige, just like we did last time. You don't have to, you can use another color if you'd like. Alright, don't forget to export this file. Alright, so go to your app.js file now and we'll add a root. So bring in your drag file component. Alright, and set up that root. We'll give it a path of drag. Alright, now we'll need to have a link to that page, so go into your home file and add the link. We'll just call this click and drag example. Alright, so if you go to your web page now, you can see you've got that link, and when you click it, it takes you to your page with your canvas. We don't like the canvas butted up against the top of the, just up against the bottom of the header, so we can push it down. So our component that wrapped our canvas, I'm sorry you're not watching, now you're on the video with me, or on the code with me. So use the drag main content, that's what we called it, wasn't it? That's right. I'm going to use that class selector. We'll use display, flex direction, go column. Alright, and if you take a look at your page, that moves the canvas down from the top. Alright, we didn't have to use flexbox. I just usually use it because I am a creature of habit. I just like to do the same things over and over again. Alright, so now what we'll do is we'll add a circle to our canvas. Alright, this will be the circle that we'll click on and drag around. So go back to your drag.jsx file, and inside of the div, add a circle. Alright, remember the circle takes three important properties, right? The center of the circle in the x direction, meaning, sorry, you're not watching the code again, so I keep forgetting to switch over there. So what I did is I just added a circle here inside of my SVG element. So basically, the circle has those three properties. It has CX, CY, and R being the radius of the circle. CX being the distance in the x direction from the left side of the canvas, and CY being the distance to the center of the circle from the top part of the canvas downward. Alright, so for now, let's say that the center of the circle in the x direction will go 150 pixels over from the top, and we'll do the same or over from the left, excuse me. And we'll do the same thing for y, so it'll be 150 down from the top. And we'll give it a radius of 20. Okay, and if you take a look at your canvas, you can see now you have a circle that is 150 pixels over from the left side and 150 pixels down from the top. All right, and we can move it to the center of the canvas if we'd like. Alright, so remember we had a width of 900, so the halfway mark in the x direction would be 450. And then we had a height of 700, so halfway in the y direction would be 350. Alright, and take a look at your page. You can see your circles right there at the center of your canvas. And if you don't like the black circle, you can change the color a little bit. Right? Remember, with SVGs we can use the fill property and set the color. I like using Dodger Blue, as you know. Alright, and I've got my little circle here. If I'd like a little different color border around it, I can do that. Do you remember what the property was? It was stroke. And the stroke color, we'll say something crazy. Why not hot pink? And if we don't, well, if you take a look at it now, you can see it's there, but it's a bit thin. If we want to make it thicker, right, we can use the property stroke width. And we'll set that equal to 2 pixels. All right, and if you take a look, you can see you've got your little Dodger blue circle with a hot pink border. Okay, so now we want to be able to update the position of this circle on the canvas as the X and Y values that we're going to generate through mouse events, or we're going to pick up through mouse events, gives us. And it's probably going to be easier to understand if we just continue to go through the code, so I'll stop talking too much about it. All right, so just like before, we'll want to create a reference to a DOM node so that we can update that DOM node accordingly when we want to by using that variable canvas. And that's what we did last time. We're going to use 2 state variables to keep track of the X and Y position on the canvas. All right, so we'll first set up our X value. So we'll say X and set X. And we can set them initially to 150 like we did last time. And then same with Y. All right, so then if we go down to our circle, rather than hard coding in the position, we can make it variable. All right, and these are our state variables, X and Y. So recall I initialized both the X and Y values to 150. So if you take a look at your web page, then the circle is back over at X equals 150 and Y equals 150. If we want to put it to the middle of the canvas like we did before, right, it's easy enough. Right, we can just set the initial value to 450 for X and 350 for Y. Right, and that puts us back in onto the middle of the canvas. All right, good. So now we'd like to be able to click on this thing and drag it around, right, which we can't do now. So the first thing we'll want to do is, since we're going to be updating state and then we're going to base the movements of the circle on the updated state, we'll use effect. All right, and remember we're going to be using D3, so we've got to import that. So we'll set up our SVG variable. D3.select, and then we use, just like last time, canvas.current. And that allows us to attach our movements to that DOM node. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we'll want to define, we'll want to set up what we're going to do when we click on the canvas. All right, so that will we'll invoke a function that handles that mouse down event. So with JavaScript, just vanilla JavaScript, we had on mouse down. But for us, and using D3, it's a little bit different. It's not much. All right, so we can say SVG, actually not SVG, but just on. Sorry, it was SVG on, and then the event is mouse down. All right, and we'll use an anonymous function here. All right, and we'll invoke a function which we'll call update mouse position. We'll just say update mouse pause. We'll pass in the SVG as a parameter. All right, but we'll be getting an error for now because we haven't actually defined our function yet, so let's do that. And we'll be passing into it, remember, our SVG. Now we'll be looking at the mouse move event. Okay, so what we'll want to do is we will want to get the X and Y coordinates relative to the top left corner of the SVG when we click on the SVG. So we can say let that point equal d3.mouse. All right, and the mouse is a function in D3. And then we use canvas.current. And then we'll want to see as a check before we do anything else what that point looks like. So go ahead and log that to the console. And open up your developer tools, open up your console, click and move around, and you don't see anything, and there's an obvious reason for that. I hope you caught it. So go back. We have to actually invoke our function. Okay, so go back to your web page, click and move around, and again, nothing. So what did we miss? All right, just give me a second here. Okay, well, we created a reference for our DOM node, but we didn't actually add it to our SVG, so we need to do that here. So we use the ref property and canvas. Okay, so now go back to your web page, click on it. Now you can see that you're getting the points that are just underneath where your cursor is on the SVG. So for example, if I were to go right over the center of the mouse, or of the circle, excuse me, I would see that if you look at the console at the very bottom, basically there are 2 points. The X coordinate is 449, or roughly 450, and the Y is 350. So that's what we would expect. All right, so we're registering our X and Y values, or X and Y coordinates appropriately. Unfortunately, even after we release the button on the mouse, is still continue to update the mouse position, so we want to stop that. But first, let's actually try to get this circle to move around. So go back to your code, all right, and rather than just logging things to the console, we need to update the x and y values, which represent, in this case, the center of the circle in both the x and the y direction. Right, so we can change this, set x to, and that would be the first element in that array. It was an array of 2 values, if you recall. And just so you're not confused, oh, we can move in the x direction. So probably I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so just so we're not confused here, one more time, let's log things to the console. All right, so remember when we clicked and we moved around, we ended up with a bunch of points, that would be updated every time you move the cursor. And each point is given in an array of 2 elements, the first element representing the x value and the second representing the y value. So that's what we're going to use to update the position of our circle. Okay, so let's go back. All right, remove the console log statement. So we'll use the second element in that array for the y value. All right, so let's take a look at our page. So click down on the canvas. Okay, so the circle goes right to where the mouse is. Now start moving it around and around and around. So you can now drag your circle. All right, but if you let up on your mouse, the circle still comes along with you. Right? It's like being in a bad relationship with a clingy person, right? They just keep hanging on. Sometimes you have to move to a new neighborhood. Right, but we don't want to have to move to a new neighborhood. All we need to do is just update our code to make things a little bit easier for us. So going back up to use effect, we'll add another method. And this one will be mouse up. We'll use the mouse up event. And then rather than update mouse position, we'll say fix mouse position. And we still have to pass in the SVG to it. And again, we haven't defined the function yet, so we get errors, or we get an error. So go down, let's create that function. Alright, and then we'll say here SVG on, and in this case the event is mouse up. We're lifting the button, we're unpressing it. Alright, and then rather than defining a function and doing some other stuff in there, we can just set this to null. Okay, so now go back to your canvas, and click on your mouse, move it around, let up. Oops, what's going on here? Wow, this is a very stubborn circle. All right, let's take a look at where we went wrong in our code. And you probably already guessed, as before, I forgot to uncomment my function. All right, so now things should be okay. So let's go back. All right, click on the mouse, move it around, let up off of the button. Okay, now I'm starting to get frustrated. This is a really persistent circle. All right, so I'll go back to your code. All right, so yeah, so mouse up here is fine, right? But actually down here, we want to set mouse move to null, right? Not mouse up. Sorry about that. So here, mouse move, right? It gets set so that every time we move the cursor around, it updates both the x and y values. So we have to remove this functionality here by setting mouse move to null. All right, so this should work. Go back to your page, click, drag around, let up. All right, and it works. Good. So we don't have to have that clingy circle in our lives if we don't want to. All right, so that's it for now. But before we go, I'll leave you with a little bit of a challenge. Now, take a look at what happens if you click on your circle and you drag it. Take the cursor off the canvas, all right, and then let up. All right, so like before, you would hope that it would keep the circle from following you around once you went back to the canvas, but that's not the case. Right? And you can probably guess the reason for that is because when you let up off of the button off canvas, right, because you are not on the SVG, right, none of this gets handled, right, because you were off the SVG. So the challenge to you is to just figure out a way to make it so that even if you go off of the SVG and you release the button, the circle doesn't follow you around anymore when you come back to the canvas. So I'll leave you with that, and as always, thanks for checking me out, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.